SoundCloud. Good morning, everyone. This is Catherine Clement, and we're here at the Saturday Morning Mastermind. We are reading the book Sacred Contracts by Caroline Myss, and I'm on the Kindle, and we're on page 62. That'll be a little bit different on your Kindle or in the hard copy book. But before we get started, I'd like to have my friends introduce themselves, and then I'll start reading the chapter.
Is that my cue?
Yep. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Jason from Tampa, and glad to be here. Thank you.
And good morning from Denver, Colorado. Glad to be here as well.
Awesome. All right. It's always good to be with friends on a Saturday morning. So I have us, hopefully it's pulled up the right bookmark. I have us at Contracts of the Masters. The Hebrew Bible, known to Christians as the Old Testament, together with the Christian New Testament, amount to an extensive documentation of God's contractual agreements with the people of Israel and later with the followers of Jesus. Indeed, the English word testament itself refers to a legally binding agreement, as in last will and testament. In the opening chapters of Genesis, Yahweh makes an agreement with Adam that he may eat freely of every tree of the garden, except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For in the day that you eat it, Yahweh says, you shall die. Adam and Eve fail to keep their agreement, and they suffer the consequences, death and foreknowledge of death. According to Rabbi Harold Kushner's intriguing theory, Adam and Eve were not actually punished for eating from the tree of knowledge, but simply entered the world of human self-consciousness that separates us from the animals, who don't have to make the kinds of moral and ethical decisions that are integral to thinking people's lives or to a sacred contract. But the fact that Adam and Eve's troubles began when they did not uphold their end of an agreement with the divine shows the importance with which our Western spiritual ancestors endowed contracts. And God's contract with Noah, as we have seen, provided for nothing less than the survival and flourishing of the entire human race. Adam, Eve, and Noah are clearly metaphorical figures who represent reinterpretations of the creation and flood myths of ancient Mesopotamia, which the ancient Hebrews would have assimilated into their culture along with a respect for law and order. But Abram, later called Abraham, must to some extent have been based on a flesh and blood character, the founder of the Hebrew race and religion. His detailed, personalized story and those of other spiritual leaders who founded many of the world's great traditions represent compelling manifestations of a sacred contract in action. The wisdom of men such as Moses, Jesus, Mohammed, and the Buddha shines through all mythic overlays and religious dogmas. The truths that they embodied in their lives transcend culture and personal beliefs. You needn't be an Orthodox Christian to believe that you should love your neighbor as yourself, for instance. Nor do you have to be a Buddhist to acknowledge that the craving, hatred, and ignorance that derive from seeing ourselves as essentially separate from all other beings are the major source of suffering in our lives. Regardless of the Master's traditions, their teachings speak to us because they lived actual physical lives. They also confronted universal challenges on their paths to self-awareness and to comprehension of the power they carried inside of them. Each of them had to awaken to the full measure of his contract. They were not born enlightened. Their teachings are blueprints for what our spirits need to do to make the transition from seeing life in physical terms to understanding the purpose and meaning of life on a symbolic level. Many of us believe that if only we were smarter or dedicated or holier, we would know what we were supposed to be doing on Earth, because then God or the universe would enlighten us about our real mission. We mistakenly believe that the great spiritual leaders such as Abraham, Moses, the Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad had their contract spelled out for them. Yet none of these figures truly saw his contract early on. Their life paths were not obvious, but required that they develop the trust and stamina to surrender unconditionally to the will of heaven. As a rule, that doesn't happen to a child or an adolescent or even a young adult, nor does it happen all at once. We develop faith and other abilities in stages, and our progress becomes most obvious in midlife. Still, some people do acquire insight in a single rush, an epiphany. For instance, otherwise ordinary people who have had near-death experiences report a sudden awakening, after which they become conscious of their life as part of a larger plan, and they live it differently from that point forward. In the Hindu tradition, spiritual and non-spiritual people alike have reported an extraordinary surge of energy known as a Kundalini awakening that shoots up the spine to the crown of the head and often transforms the focus of their lives to spiritual service. These ancient spiritual leaders, as men, came face to face with God and truth. In their humanness, these prophets, as well as numerous other saintly men and women, felt confusion and fear as they learned the meaning of their tasks. Guidance was often given to them when they needed it, but they still often doubted themselves and felt abandoned, even despairing, as they sought to fulfill their mission, which some of them learned quite late in life. Each struggled with his ego, and each was tested, some several times, to determine whether he could finally connect with the divinity within him. Collectively, their lives form the archetypal prototype for the process of how a sacred contract is revealed. Oh, I said from. I thought that doesn't make sense. Collectively, their lives form an archetypal prototype for the process of how a sacred contract is revealed. We'll go through the 5 stages of a sacred contract in the next chapter. But first, let's examine some of the themes or soul, quote, tasks that appear in these stages. 4 of the prophets went through a renunciation of their previous life and identity and were, quote, reborn with a new identity. Each also was renamed to recognize this spiritual attainment. A ritual soul naming occurs when an individual can no longer be recognized as his normal self by the society he serves. When he has evolved beyond his human function into an eternal self, a universal leader or embodiment of a greater truth. Abram became Abraham when the Lord sealed their covenant. Jesus became known as the Messiah, and after his death as the Christ, the Anointed One. Following his spiritual transformation, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the Enlightened One, and Muhammad, son of Allah, came to be known as the Prophet. The soul naming also represents a conscious fulfillment of the necessary tasks of service, the sacred contract. The individual has come fully into his power, even though he has not yet completed his contract or life. From that point on, he or she operates only from the power of the soul and speaks only with the voice of the soul. So the soul is given its own name. The ego or former self is no longer dominant, but becomes a servant companion, a vehicle through which the soul communicates messages from the divine. Orphans and expatriate heroes. As Joseph Campbell writes in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the really creative acts are represented as those deriving from some sort of dying to the world. The archetypal hero's journey described by Campbell, Sir James G. Fraser's The Golden Bough, and others always begins with a process of separation or alienation from the tribe, followed by a series of difficult challenges that the hero must meet alone. The journey culminates in a descent into the abyss of self-doubt and a loss of faith in the divine. but then results in a vital transformation and a renewal of trust, which in turn leads to a revelation of some new knowledge, insight, or wisdom. The hero then returns to the tribe and imparts this insight, or tries to, since heroes, like prophets, are not always welcome in their hometown. Their presence unsettles us and makes us aware that other truths and lives exist beyond our physical routines. Yet we fear the disruption that pursuing our divine potential would create, even though our everyday comfort will be disrupted if it is standing in the way of our contract. When you become conscious of your contract, as opposed to living it in an unconscious way, you go through a painful process of severance similar to the hero's journey, because you are no longer part of the tribal mind. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, Jesus said. You have broken away from the general mindset, and the group is likely to perceive your individuation, like anything new or different from the status quo, as a fundamental threat to its own unity. Ironically, as in the case of these great teachers, severance from one's personal tribe can lead to something beneficial to the survival of the universal human tribe. The great mystics, Abraham, Moses, the Buddha, Jesus, Mohammed, all shared a common fate of abandonment and separation from their tribe early in their mission, and this alienation or exclusion was essential to the completion of their contract. Abram left the ancient Sumerian city of Ur and set out for Canaan, then later was compelled by famine to make a sojourn in Egypt. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, the Lord told him. Another key figure in the Hebrew Bible, Moses, was an orphan who was forced to flee Egypt after killing an Egyptian in an act of rage. After God appeared to him in the burning bush, Moses begged not to be made the leader of his people, insisting that he had none of the requisite qualities. Jesus' own parentage was questioned by his neighbors, since Mary was pregnant when Joseph married her, as a perceived bastard or mamzer, the child of a woman impregnated by someone outside of the community. Jesus would have been without a voice in his local congregation. No bastard shall enter the assembly of the Lord, the Torah commands. When he returned to his hometown of Nazareth after his enlightenment to teach, Jesus was met with a cold reception by the contemptuous locals, who said, "Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" But later, when Jesus was preaching and was informed that his blood family was listening outside, his response was, "Who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters?" Looking around at those sitting near him, he indicated that they were his family. Although many of the people of Israel followed Jesus and his teachings, the leaders of his own religious tradition, for the most part, rejected him and his message. His outsider status would mark Jesus throughout his public ministry. In marked contrast to the humble, shadowy origins of Jesus, the Buddha was born into a wealthy and powerful family in the foothills of the Himalayas. Had he remained at home, he would probably have been a tribal leader and a great warrior. Legend holds that on the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha to be, an astrologer told his father, Suddhodana, that the boy would become either a universal monarch whose chariot wheels would roll across the land, or an enlightened one who would set in motion the wheel of the Dharma, the great truth that would alleviate humanity's suffering. Suddhodana preferred the first possibility, but despite his best efforts, he could not keep his son from discovering the world of suffering and death outside of his opulent palace. Although married with an infant son, Siddhartha determined to leave behind home, family, inheritance, and tribe, and embark on a hero's journey on behalf of humanity. He became a voluntary orphan to search for truth and explore his inner self. Drawn to the saffron-robed figure of a wandering monk who appeared serene amid the suffering of the world, Siddhartha shaved his head and went looking for a spiritual teacher. According to tradition, he studied with two of the leading meditation teachers of his day and practiced extreme asceticism with a small group of like-minded seekers. Yet in time, Siddhartha rejected both the conventional meditation and the asceticism of the forest monks, along with the established priestly religion of the Hindu Brahmins, once again orphaning himself in order to discover his own path. Like Jesus, he returned from his journey with something of great value to the tribe. The Prophet Muhammad's father died before he was born, and his mother died when he was only 6, leaving Muhammad under the protection of his uncle, Abu Talib. Although he was cared for, to be without parents in the tribal society of 7th century Arabia left one vulnerable both financially and physically. Yet Muhammad drew on his reserves of inner strength and integrity to establish himself as a reliable caravan worker. He was entrusted with storing the possessions of other merchants and was given the nickname of Al-Amin, the trustworthy. At the age of 25, after successfully managing the caravans of a wealthy female merchant named Khadijah, he accepted her offer of marriage, even though she was 15 years his senior. When Muhammad was about 40 himself, he began to receive revelations from the angel Gabriel in a cave where he went to meditate. These transmissions from Allah, Arabic for the God, eventually formed the Quran, Islam's sacred scripture. Yet, as Muhammad relayed the revelations first to a close circle of family and friends, and then to others in the cities of Mecca and Medina, he began to draw fierce resistance from fellow Arabs. Many opposed these new teachings, which forbade the worships of idols and threatened the role of the Kaaba, an ancient Meccan place of worship that was also a great source of commerce in that part of the Arabian Peninsula, modern-day Saudi Arabia. The local clans also scorned the social reforms included in the Quran, which mandated caring for widows and orphans and greater rights for women, who at the time were treated largely as chattel. At one point, Muhammad was forced to seek refuge from threats against his life in the mountain fortress of Abu Talib, where he became a virtual prisoner. A lengthy military campaign and pitched battles followed, but Muhammad prevailed, initiating a long era of spiritual and material growth for the very tribe that had so fiercely rejected him at first. His message has since spread to include about 1/6 of the universal tribe. Once each of these spiritual leaders became conscious of his purpose, it reshaped his life entirely. Abraham, for instance, was a fairly prosperous herdsman in the nomadic tradition of the Semites, for he was awakened by the voice of God. Moses, too, was apparently content tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro before the same voice woke him up. Jesus toiled as a carpenter until the heavens spoke to him at the age of 30. The Buddha was 29 and a child of privilege when the inner call sounded. Muhammad was prosperous and 40. These men did not grow up knowing they had a divine destiny. They had to learn their contracts. Let me see how long this next one is. Yeah, I'll do this next one and then we'll stop. The great missions. Even after Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad were given their specific missions to fulfill, they still often challenged their agreements and the heavens. They strove to accomplish tasks at the direction of the divine, but they were not told the reasons why they had to do what they had been commanded. Given how uncertain they were, even with direct intervention and guidance, you need to accept that only through acting to uncover your contract will it be revealed to you. Because the Masters' biographies are filled with stories of miracles, apparitions, profound interactions with the divine, or near superhuman accomplishments of self-discipline, love, and will, and not of the details of their daily lives, we do not know how they sustained their faith in between divine communications. It is possible that during the ordinary days and weeks of their lives, they questioned even more relentlessly and insistently whether they were doing exactly what was expected of them. They may even have questioned their own identity. Jesus once asked Peter, "Whom do men say that I am?" It seems less likely that he asked this because he was curious about whether his divinity was being truly recognized than because he sought further validation that he was on the right path. Our own process of learning our sacred contract is unlikely to parallel the experience of these extraordinary leaders, of course. We are not likely to have profound mystical experiences or direct contact with the divine. Yet, we can still learn to recognize the basic outline of the unfolding of our contract through the master's stories. All right, I'll stop there. That should give us plenty to talk about.
Plenty.
So they were all just as questioning, doubtful, like the prophets didn't, it wasn't necessarily, everything wasn't laid out and easy for them like they really did. They were ostracized by their communities, and well, obviously Jesus was killed. So, there was really, and they weren't even sure that what they were doing wasn't something that they just made up in their head, you know? So they were pretty
Well,
brave to keep walking their paths.
I totally get that because it seems like that's the um, plan for everybody because we all go through that phase of self-doubt and wondering what I should do and what's my purpose and why am I here and all of those questions that seem to haunt all of us.
Well, that's a really good point that they were kind of, I don't think of them as being outcasts, but I guess they kind of were in their own time. And they were sort of struggling to fit in, but they also felt like they had a bigger purpose. I think one thing that they all had in common as well is they had someone telling them early on that they had a bigger purpose. Someone or something gave them the idea that they had a bigger purpose. And so if that came from what they perceived as as someone of or something of authority, then that gave them a reason to question, is there something greater than what it is that they were currently experiencing? And so if you're given those possibilities, I would imagine that living in those times, it would be quite quite a difference between what you would consider your place in society and what your fate might be if you're like, well, if I'm just a normal person here, then now if I'm going to be, a carpenter, or I'm going to be someone of I guess one was royalty, and I mean, you kind of had your sort of just going to be a regular Joe, maybe, maybe so to speak, or I could be, what was it, a universal what was it, warrior, or 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 an enlightened person.
Am I important or not?
It's like, yeah, I mean, I get to choose. I mean, given a couple options, which should I try for? I think the other thing in these stories though was that kind of no matter what they chose, they were pulled back into the other, the direction that they ultimately went. They were pulled back into that in some way by maybe multiple uh, things, multiple people and different events that made them continue to question things along the way. It's not as though it was just made apparent to them and then they decided, okay, this is it, and went along that path to begin with,
So this idea of self-doubt and all that has been with us for a long time.
What was it that it was saying that about the contract being revealed? That it was only after what questioning the agreement, or was it
Taking
fulfilling the
action
agreement?
or something.
What action? What?
Yeah, action.
Faith in action.
Hmm. Kind of that reminds me of the saying where you're, what is it? Your where your what is it? Your energy goes where your focus, or energy flows where your focus goes, or something like that.
Eh,
Yeah.
That we get it right. And and so in a way that, that's a current thing that people say regarding um, business or marketing or whatever in your enlightened perspective, or even where they're talking about your mindset, right? So um, and in that you have to have that focus to begin with, um, and then that will direct and bring into focus your energies, and by doing that, then that kind of gets the ball rolling, and then when you take the action, um, more is revealed to you about the next few steps, because a lot of times you don't see the first steps, or I mean, you don't see at least the second, third, and fourth step because you haven't taken the first step yet.
And that first step always seems like the biggest and the worst, and testing of your faith. Because I don't know that I could be responsible enough to step up and fake it until I make it, or take the bull by the horns, or whatever phrase you want to use.
Take that leap of faith and garner that faith to begin with inside you, when there is no real, there's no game plan that's already been created for you. You're just kind of paving your own path, cutting your own path. Um, Sometimes you can see that next step, and other times you get to the end of the first step and you're still kind of left in the dark. uh, and that's when you seek counsel. Maybe you ask your brothers and sisters, what do people think what do people see you as? Maybe you test the waters, or you sit there for a while and wonder if you can figure out your way back. Can I turn around?
It's like when they say, let the ship sail or whatever, and then you have to burn it because you can't go back.
Oh, burn the ships
Yeah,
so you don't the gives you
that's where the
motivation.
self-confidence and self-doubt and all that
It's
is the quest.
going back isn't an option at that point, right? Yeah. Going all in with it.
Well, so how old was Noah when all his stuff started? I don't think he was prophesied to be anybody important. Like he was old, wasn't he? And then all of a sudden God told him to build an ark or something. I
Yeah, it
was
was
sent to a lot of churches, but I didn't embrace any of them, so I'm not as perfectly clear on everything that Noah went through, but I can certainly relate to Noah because I had an audible voice tell me it's going to flood when I was looking at a place that I wanted to rent. And sure enough, it flooded. So, like, I totally get it. I wasn't told to build an ark, I was just told not to rent that place. It's going to flood. Um, but
You found out later that it flooded?
oh, it was that huge 1,000-year flood in Boulder.
Oh,
Yeah, I was coming down out of the mountains and I was gonna rent a place in the middle of one of the canyons, and I was told, no, it's going to flood. Well, I was actually told to go to the second, to not rent a floor level apartment, that I could rent on the second level. And I was arguing with my guides or whoever was talking to me because I was super handicapped. I had a dog, I had Sequoia at the time. I couldn't go up and down stairs. Well, when you live in a second story place, you're constantly going up and down stairs, having to, get your groceries up the stairs. And every time the dog has to pee, you got to go up and down the stairs. And I was like, there's no effing way to rent a second story apartment and have to
not
do
at all.
stairs. But because those voices have kept me out of trouble the majority of my life, I listened and I did rent the second story, and the first level got completely flooded while I was in Alaska. So I can definitely relate to Noah because I even asked that. I said, what am I, fucking Noah now?
Ah,
That I'm surprised they talk to me at all, really, because of the way I answer them. But thank goodness, because I didn't lose everything, and a lot of people did.
and I struggle that I don't listen, or it's the archetype of the saboteur and the fool that I feel like run my life so much, that the contracts I signed or something, and I'm not listening, and I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be the Noah, and definitely not the Jesus.
So
Yeah, being
so
Jesus would have been, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. When you think of Jesus and those that were prophesied to be somebody great, from childhood, what a lot of pressure. Good God.
now, I don't know that Jesus was had been told he was supposed to be something great, like by someone else, or that he even knew of his own, like of any prophecies that he might have been fulfilling. He just, from what I understand, is he just kind of understood for himself, um, just the things that he knew, kind of a thing. He, I don't know. I mean,
Didn't some wise men show up with gold and shit though? Like he was immaculately conceived. That's
when
pretty.
he was a baby, I think the three wise men, that tale of that, that story was, that was real. But, I guess, yeah, if you grow up and you're being told that you had a pretty interesting first birthday that way, then you might think that there might be something else, something special about you, I guess. So yeah, that's true. I hadn't really.
It's the inner knowing that he had, I think, that guided his life.
Yeah, I'm sure somewhere, some way within himself, he felt different. But I mean, I don't know if y'all have ever lived in a small rural community where everybody knows everything about everybody. But I can just imagine these villages or whatever back then. I mean, it would have to be 100 times worse, and they were much more communal than we are now. And so everybody would know about these guys showing up with gold and myrrh and frankincense. And of course, Mary was already getting blamed, called a whore or whatever because she was pregnant before her and Joseph married. So I imagine that they were the black sheep of the community on some levels. And then on the other hand, they must have sort of been a threat to the community because of all of this big to do going on. I don't know. I can't imagine it. They've got some pretty good shows out now that kind of depict all this stuff, but I haven't necessarily watched them.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting idea too. And I think it was said in the book, anyways, that um, about Adam and Eve being told that that would be one of the consequences or something, that they would become an outcast, or a threat to the community because they were different somehow. Um, I don't know. I picked up on something like that. Maybe it was.
Like they had the plague or some communicable disease or something.
Well, it's like yeah, some, like they would be a threat in a way of, to the normalcy of the tribe, where, um they that they would be outsiders, in a sense that they weren't following the rules of the tribe to begin with. And if they were to accept them into the tribe, then they would be, um, sort of, uh, not obeying their own rules, I guess. And so being seen as a threat to the good of the community, because they're different in certain ways. But then again, that's like, the, um, you know feeling, that's the safe safe place of the community. right? We all always saying, get out of your comfort zone. That was like the community has a comfort zone if they're, not being accepting of anything new and too rigid in their own rules, then they're unwilling to get out of their community's comfort zone to accept a bigger reality. Um, I mean, those
Amazing
are
how that's playing out worldwide right now, isn't it?
Yeah. Kind of what I was thinking, Catherine.
the intolerance, um, and deceptiveness, is having making some big problems in this day and age. What was the overall what was this overall paragraph or what have you about then? Do you exactly? I mean, she always mentions so much. The author always mentions so much um in regards to her examples. I get lost in the adventure.
Yeah,
I
she
am
does
just,
give a lot of examples. I think it's just she was just drawing parallels between different spiritual leaders that most people have probably heard of, and just pointing out that they too walked this hero's journey. Everybody has to walk this hero's journey on their own. Whenever I think of the hero's journey, I always think of, um, oh, what's the name of that movie? Lion King, because that's just the perfect hero's journey. I mean, all Disney movies are based on the hero's journey if you look at them.
yep.
Moana, all of them, the Wizard of Oz. I don't think that was Disney, but a lot of movies that we've all seen and love and are endearing to us are the hero's journey. And I think she just wanted to point out that, people think that these spiritual leaders are some kind of special, like somehow they have special powers to have more faith than we do, and they don't. Like they were just as questioning and doubtful and um, unwilling to cooperate with their contract as we are, and they didn't necessarily know that when they were born, they were going to be who they turned out to be. Some of them didn't find out till late in life that they needed to build an ark, or some burning bush was talking to somebody. I mean, uh, those people would have to question their sanity just as we do today, or at least I do a lot of times
I do.
with my with my life and how completely magical. I do live a magical life. There's no doubt about it. So I don't really have to have a lot of faith because it's put in my face all the time. But for many people, like they just think that the prophets were different than we are, and they're not. They're no different than we are at all.
Hmm.
That's what I was referring to when I was saying I don't want to take the responsibility for having that role, that power, that position.
I think
Yet,
that's a common. Go ahead.
yeah,
And the stories of the Bible, and you do see that quite a bit, where Noah didn't want to do what he was asked to do, and Paul didn't want to do what he was asked to do, or who was it?
And
The person who
wasn't it
the
Noah
person
that had a stuttering problem?
I'm not sure. That's a detail I'm not aware of. Maybe. Um, like there was just different reasons for it. Either they questioned themselves, or they had reason that, not to want to do. Like it was the person who healed uh Paul, actually, because Paul did some terrible things to Christians in the name of the Bible, and he had persecuted people that weren't following the strict laws, and then God had made him um, blind, and some person was told by God that they were supposed to heal him, and they were like, I don't want to heal him because he did all these terrible things, and he'll probably come after me. So he's like, he didn't want to do it either. And that's, I guess, with like you said, part of, maybe that is just as much part of the hero's journey idea, the reluctance and resistance of taking on your um uh, the role that is being forced upon you. uh, how many of these people were actually looking to find a, be, like, had the idea beforehand that there's something greater was meant for them, and they were just itching to get started with it, you know, just gung ho about whatever it is. Tell me, let me go, let me at them, type of a mentality, when in fact it was like they were confused and reluctant, and then resisted to the point where
Being
they
drug into the job.
yeah,
You're going this way, whether you want to or not.
conscripted. Yeah. Huh.
I think
So
she may have also just been wanting to show um, well, I know when I was I was just a little kid, so it's a long time ago, but when I was being shipped off to churches on Sunday, it seemed like now I was in the South, and this was like, there was a lot of Pentecostal churches and things like that, where their faith is, they're not open at all. Like that was one of the things, even as a child, that was one of the things that really made me question Christianity, because every church I went to, everyone in that church appeared, at least to me, to be under the belief that what was being preached at that service was absolute truth. Pretty much only those people in the building were going to heaven. The rest of us were off to hell. Like, and then the next Sunday I'd get sent to a different church, and they would have the exact same feelings as the church I went to last week. And I'm like, well, you know, and then as I started studying a little bit about religion, because it made me curious, um, that's when I found out that every other country, basically, well, not every country, but like there's a lot of other religions that are the same way, as far as they believe that theirs is the only truth and the only way, and everybody else is left out. And many of them have many of the cultures, like in Egypt and different places, they had their own origin stories that were different from Adam and Eve, but almost the same story. Like,
Story of creation.
yeah, as far as creation goes, like it's so, there can't be just one group of special people that are going to heaven. Like it just, it, there's just too many people that believe that about their own religion. And
Hmm.
when I found the different origin stories and how close they were really to the one that I had been taught, it really made me think, well, like,
It's possible.
what is
Yeah.
the real origin story? I still don't know. And I don't know that anybody knows for sure. There's a lot of thoughts out there about it, but I'm not sure anybody knows for sure.
There have been a lot of scientific minds in that have tried to disprove whatever the origin story is or was. And a lot of them end up proving that what they were trying to disprove. I can't give an example, but
It's also interesting how we will not only be reluctant resistance, but then we'll pick and choose. Like, finally, okay, I'll do this, but I'll take this part, but I'm gonna leave this part out, and I'll do this.
exactly.
Um, and I just don't know. I guess every group has that within the history of their um established group, is that at some point or another they kind of picked and choose, or had some reluctance that caused them to go in the direction that they've gone. And now what is the other thing is pride, that we don't want to then admit that there might be something that we missed, and something that was some mistake that we made way back when, that was like, oh, okay, we'll just sweep that under the rug and continue on, and let stay in our, if they're in a, if they found a comfort zone, then they don't want to go out of that comfort zone either. So I think it's definitely good to have faith, and I am a believer, and I do I do like uh the idea of and respect what what uh the story of Christ and what he went through, and for us. So um and that's where I'm at with that, because it's pretty inclusive if you want to be included. It's it's um however, people within that, in different groups that have uh, that were kind of created along the way of this, a lot of it is cited on the lines of whether they want to be inclusive of others, and um, you know include other are you supposed to be singing and dancing, or are you, no, you can't sing and dance, and you're supposed to you have to sit in silence, um, and that's how you learn.
Even though you can't cut your hair.
Yeah, or can you cut your hair, or don't cut your hair, and that's what, yeah. I mean, things that seem to be inconsequential when you look at where the immensity of spirituality, it, that is just that they're so inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, you would think. So you sort of come off, those types of things sort of come off as though they're rules to make people like to either get people to fall in line or get this a way to see if people are following the rules. Like, well, it's visible to us if the person is or isn't cutting their hair. So then we know they're following the rules, and we can see from a distance that they're not or are part of the group, kind of a thing, or But I think the timelines have been something that has distorted everything as well. Science, science, with science learning how to, carbon date things, to very, pretty well accurately. It kind of throws everybody's understanding as to when the origin of at least humanity or civilization as we know it could be, and puts our own lineage into question as well. So it's like, it's funny how like we want we want to be we want to know what our sacred contract is, but then we also want to pull at the threads of everything as well.
You pull the wrong one and it unravels.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we're a little past the top of the hour, so final thoughts or comments before we close it up?
I'm glad I woke up for this conversation today, and I'll be happy to see you all next week.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for hosting this today. Appreciate it, Catherine, and your reading was excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, we miss everybody that couldn't make it on today. Hope everyone's well and feeling good and can have a good
Summertime
weekend.
tends to leave too many distractions, too many options for
My
most people.
heart
Love
goes
you
out to
guys.
love you too. My heart goes out to everybody out there in the world who's going through so much, and I wish it would all just everybody could find peace and live peacefully with each other. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. But I do feel for everyone out there going through something, and stay strong out there. Love you.
Great messages. Yeah, happy solstice to everyone. All we can do is keep peace within our own selves and our own hearts. And if everybody could just do that, then we would all be at peace. So love goes out to everyone out there and everything going on around the world. Just try to envision peace. That's all that we can do, really, that, and in doing
That's all
so,
we've ever wanted, world peace.
exactly. That's my prayer
Forgiveness.
multiple times a day, is just world peace. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. It was a wonderful conversation. And for those of you out there listening, again, this is the Saturday Morning Mastermind. We're known as Mindset Mastery Collective on YouTube and Facebook. Please join us. We've got 10 years of recordings from different books that we've read, and You're welcome to join us any Saturday morning. Just contact us either on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get you right in here in the Zoom with us. So I hope everyone has a wonderful solstice today and a wonderful week. And we love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.